So I begin tonight with some simple observations, because in the larger context that you would probably already be able to make yourselves. And in a sense, we live in a very powerfully tenacious cultural world where culture can go quite independent of human biology. It's one of our great both blessings and curses that we can create ideas about how to live versus waiting for the genes to change to permit it, because we are such a plastic, flexible species. That's our tremendous claim to fame. So my whole career has been, in a sense, oddly devoted to looking at the ways in which in our industrialized Western culture we have come to confuse ideology with science, and particularly in the context of how we can best or move toward a system of caring for babies that most closely match their evolutionary and biological proclivities. If there was a natural position for a mother and an infant to be, it's a baby lying ventrum on the mother's chest. All monkeys and apes exhibit it. It's minimally 65 million years old for the evolution of primate behavior. And unfortunately, in our cultural environment, this position has been deemed unacceptable and a risky position for the human infant, independent of all other circumstances, by virtue of the fact that prone infant sleep, that is, belly sleeping, stomach sleeping on an inert surface, a mattress or some other surface, especially a soft one, is a significant risk factor for babies dying of sudden infant death syndrome. But just so you know, a baby human sleeping on its mother's chest has nothing to do with the prone sleep of a baby on a prone or on an inert mattress. This baby sleeping on mother's chest is moving, vestibular stimulation, catching carbon dioxide from mother's breath, is catching her heat, the waffling of olfactory cues from her breast and her breast milk. This is the most vibrant context and the most rich environment that mimics what babies need as close as is possible in terms of developmental age, a mimicking of the uterine environment. So here is our model. This is a cultural idea: sleep like a baby. Take this, you might notice, those of you clever to see it there, it was from an actual medical journal, a sleep journal I subscribed to that was advertising medications to stem male urinary flow and difficulties during the night. And this model, though, is great, this sleep like a baby, because it's the opposite of how babies actually do sleep. Now, here this is suggesting that, oh, you put a baby in a bed and it just falls asleep, it sleeps for hours and hours and hours. Of course, any mother knows this isn't true anyway, but nonetheless, there you are. But you could never get this model, this cultural idea that we have so strongly, that babies just sleep. I mean, without the model of the formula and the cow's milk fed baby. This is a very different little creature here. The size of the molecules and the particular components of cow's milk and or formula kind of like sedate the baby and impose a way of sleeping that is not normal for the human infant. I'm skipping ahead here, but breast milk is very calorie light, exquisitely designed for relatively little amounts of protein, little amounts of fat, lots amounts of fast-burning lactose sugar, which is great for developing baby brains, but it requires the babies to be waken up an awful lot. They're going to feed very, very frequently through the night, as any mother that's breastfed, as Susan would probably attest to, they'll be feeding a lot. It's not sleep like a baby unless you realize that sleep like a baby means feed, sleep, wake, feed, sleep, wake, feed, sleep, wake, feed, sleep, wake, all the night long. And this isn't what was intended by the sort of cultural icon of sleep like a baby, which was never a reality. So I show you these very beautiful anthropological images of mothers and babies. And it may be for infants at this very early time, for the first 2 to 3 to 4 months, the only time in our lives where there is indeed a universal baby. Because I can assure you that these babies are not enculturated yet. They don't worry about getting into Notre Dame, or they don't, they're not worrying about dying, getting sick. They the only thing they know, which is different than knowing as you and I know, is what their body is feeling. You give them the environment within which its body can respond. Every baby that you see here, however exotically looking different they are doing exactly the same thing. There's no differentiation here, because these babies are all reflecting minimally a 3.6 million year old evolutionary legacy that has designed them very specifically to react to these sensory signals that I've been telling you about in very specific ways. So my colleague Sarah, who you saw in that beautiful picture, said, for a species such as primates, there's no other environment but the mother's body. This is the only thing that a human infant, I'll put it this way, knows what to do with and immediately responds. And it's probably the closest any of us will ever get to being close to our genes. Because humans, as our brain develops, the chain between what is genetically prescribed and what we actually do is so wide and variant and different. But when babies are this age, they're very close to their genes finding expression, and later that will change. And my own way of interpreting it is nothing an infant can do or cannot do makes sense except in light of the mother's body. Where's mother? What is the expectation that evolution has given these babies to do what they need to do? I was talking about Richard Ferber. Ferberizing babies means letting them cry it out. At least that's the typical way we simplify it. Anyway, but I was listening to his lecture very carefully, and he was telling us about how, everybody thinks I'm just into Ferberizing, letting babies cry it out, but I'm not. And he gives this example how a mother and dad came to his lab at Harvard in Boston, and he said the parents were saying, Dr. Ferber, we have this terrible problem. And he says, well, what's wrong? He says, well, our baby is sleeping with us. He goes, well, I know, but what's the problem? And he goes on, he says, well, we're sleeping with our baby. Yes. Why is it a problem? Are you unhappy about it? Or they say, well, that's the problem. No, we like it. Well, what are you here for? That's perfectly fine, and he was being very sympathetic. This was way back 92 that I was, and it was for a Karatani mothers organization in Sydney, Australia. So anyway, and he says, but, then the big but came in. Let me tell you why I worry about co-sleeping. And he showed all of these relational issues that could possibly be true, like the child will be afraid to go and sleep overnight with a friend, or a sibling will be jealous of the child that gets to sleep and not, or the mother and the dad won't get a lot of sleep. And he went on, the whole slide was filled with all these, they weren't deniable, but relational things that happen in lots of other social situations too. They do, they don't, they matter, they don't. Depends on who the parents are. But it helped me realize how interesting non-conscious cultural ideologies are involved in these discussions we have about sleep. And what I figured out is that with respect to co-sleeping, because it was the not popular way to do it, or it was the challenging possibility, any problem that could develop wasn't just a problem to be solved, it was a problem to argue against it. And I was sitting there thinking, I never thought of that before. He went on for 2 hours and was spending his time talking about how to solve the problems of babies sleeping alone. And yet he had just used any problem that he could think of, which may or may not even been true for particular families, that every problem was a reason you wouldn't want to go sleep. And I suddenly realized, wow, he doesn't even realize it, that's a value judgment he's making. That doesn't have anything to do with science. It's, the assumption that, we all know that, solitary sleep is the way to go here.